to see how acetate reacts in two different types of resin. Hey guys, Squdge here, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to work on this really cool mould that I have. So I have this clipboard. I'll put it sideways so you can see properly. I have this clipboard mould and I'm going to be making a clipboard. So back in Ireland we play a lot of bingo, and they play bingo regularly out there, and so I've got them. I'm going to make a board for mother-in-law, which is just going to be a white background with a Chelsea flag on top and then a clear coat. And it needs to all be very, very thin because this is a very, very thin mould, which is really cool. So that's what we're going to be working on today. I hope you enjoy. So the first thing that I did was I mixed up my resin and I added in some white from Resin 8, their opaque pigment, and I'm just going to pour that in, and I'm trying to work on the thinnest layers possible. So I've put it in, I'm just pushing it to all the edges, all the corners, and then sort of leaving it to self-level and using the heat gun to thin it out slightly so that I don't need to add more resin. At this point, I realised it was really tricky to move around, so I went and got a little board to put it on to help me move it. Obviously, once this layer had cured, it would be harder and easier to move because the resin would have cured. But for now, I just put it on this chopping board so that I could move it around a little bit easier. And then I'm just going to keep heating it until it flows and floods the entire surface. And then I'm going to let that cure for about 3 to 4 hours. I decided also to make some coasters for the father-in-law because I thought, well, it's only fair. So heat resistant resin's gone in the bottom of that. And then we're going to do a white layer using the same opaque white from Resin 8. This stuff is brilliant. It has so many uses and a little bit goes a long, long way. So I'm just going to do a white layer on these. So they're going to have a clear layer on the bottom, then this white layer, and then we're going to put some acetate onto those as well. So this is the first time I've used acetate and I've really enjoyed it actually. It's been challenging, but I've learned a lot with it, and so I think it's been quite good actually. And I'm hoping I can pass my my tricks and tips on to you, having learnt it myself. So I'm going to leave those to cure. And once they have cured for about 3 to 4 hours, I'm just going to stick these Manchester United logos that I printed off, just stick it onto that resin. Right, we're now going to do our clipboard, and what I am going to do is I'm just going to block the name. So at the top we have got this Chelsea symbol, their logo, Chelsea Football Club, because that's who she supports. And we're then, yeah, I know, my mother-in-law is Chelsea, my father-in-law is Man United, don't ask. And then once I've done a very, very thin layer of clear, much the same way, spreading it out, getting it as thin as I possibly can, but still full coverage, then I'm going to add the acetate pieces on. So again, using this heat gun just to try and thin it out because there's enough resin there. It just doesn't want to spread out unless you help it. So going to put our acetate in, put our Chelsea logo up at the top. I'm just sort of sliding it along, moving it along to try and avoid getting any bubbles underneath it. And then we're going to add our, down at the bottom, it just says property of, and then my mother-in-law's name, which I'll explain why at the end. In fact, I already explained why, because they do bingo. And here I've just got a little bit extra resin, and I've just put it around the edge of each piece of acetate, and I'm encouraging it to go over the top. And then here I'm pushing from under the acetate out to try and pull out any bubbles that were under there. So once that is done, I'm going to put a tiny bit more on top just to sort of hold the acetate pieces in place, because they do tend to get up and float around. Even with this small layer of resin, they will get up and float around. So we're going to leave those to cure. I'm going to do one final layer on top of the coasters with heat resistant resin. This will trap that piece of acetate in completely. Make sure that's not any bubbles, and leave that to cure for 48 hours. Because it is the heat resistant, it cures slower. So I'm going to take the clipboard out of the mould, and at this point I realised that I'm going to do another white layer because it was too thin. So I'm adding masking tape around each side, and then I'm going to cut that down, and all that does is when I pour resin on top of these, this is going to stop the resin from overflowing the other side. So if you get drips, those little bits of masking tape will help you clean it off. So I'm going to cut off any excess with my blade, and then we'll be ready to add it on. So this just protects the back layer, the back side, should I say, of your resin piece. You can use frog tape, you can use masking tape, you can use any sort of painter's tapes. They all work really well, but do test it first with your resin to make sure that it will work. I don't want to tell you something that's going to end up ruining your project. So I did another layer of white, much more opaque this time. So I'm just going to put a very thin layer of white on, exactly the same way. Small amount, spread it out, use the heat gun to spread it out, just so we've got a covering before we put our acetate pieces on the other side, because I didn't want you to be able to clearly read through each side. You can still see through each side, and that's absolutely fine, but I was hoping that it would have been opaque enough the first time, but I evidently didn't put enough in. To be honest, I've not made a white project using that much resin, so I kind of underestimated the amount of white I would need in it. But I love how this is coming together now. So as you can see, I'm really just spreading everything out to the edges, making sure, you know, we've got the holes at the top, spreading it out, because what you don't want to do is put too much on and then it overflows and then you've ruined your project because it's too thick to add the actual clipboard part of it onto the board. So I'm just putting a very thin layer on and encouraging it to spread naturally, which is the best way to do it. It does mean you have to have patience, and I don't have a lot of patience, but you know, we got there in the end, and I think it was worth it, because you don't want your clipboard ending up being so thick that you can't add the clip to it, or it's too bulky to use, or you know, what have you. This is a practical item. You want it to be able to use easily. So I'm just adding small bits and spreading it round to try and get this to naturally flow. And just using the heat gun helps thin it out, which helps because I'm that impatient. Here goes, so we are back to demould our coasters. So we have our two set of coasters here. So we'll pop them out of our moulds. So once I popped them out, I realised there was a little speck of dirt on this one, so I was going to drill down to it. You can use this technique to use bubbles or bits of dirt. So I've got a little drill bit that looks kind of like an arrow, an arrowhead. So I'm going to use that to drill down. Please, 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 if you sand or drill resin, wear your respirator, one that protects you against dust particles, because the dust of this you do not want in your lungs. You don't want it lying around or anything. So I'm just going to use tape to pick it off, and then I'm going to do this several times until I've got down and I've removed the bit of dirt, and then I can pour a layer over the top that will fill in the hole and dome the actual piece. And then I'm just using some alcohol here to dip it in and clean off any extra dust that I had missed. Right, back to our clipboard. On the other side now, I'm doing another very thin layer of resin, same as we did before, and this time I'm adding in another phrase on the other side. So this is two names, and then it says hands off or don't touch, I can't remember. Hands off, there we go. Which is a joke, because there's a few people that try and use the same clipboards, and that they sort of have a bit of a joke about who's going to use it. So I thought that'd be quite a fun thing. So in the same way, I have slid it on, I've pushed out any bubbles that are underneath it. I've just used my torch, and because this is no longer in a mould, I can now use my torch without risk of destroying my moulds. I never use my kitchen torch like that if I'm in a mould, because it will burn the resin, which will cause it to fuse to the mould, and then you'll have bits of mould stuck to your resin piece and you'll ruin your mould. So I only use the torch seeing as it is out of a mould and it's freestanding, and I know that it's not going to risk ruining my piece or ruining the mould. So just be aware of that when you're doing things like this, that you know what heat source is going to be best. And so I have done, using the gold, I have edged the coasters. This one as well. Just giving it this gold edge. And now we are going to do an edge in silver on our clipboard. So we're going to use the silver one. I'm just going to go through and do exactly the same thing, and I will take you along and you can enjoy. So these are just sort of a UV gel paint they used for nails, for doing designs on nails. So you need a UV lamp to cure it. So all I'm doing is putting a thin layer along the edge, sort of dabbing it on as I go. Obviously the thicker edges it's easier to do, like the coasters. But just dabbing it along as I go, and then when I've got the right amount, I'm not going to do all of it because I can't cure it all at once. When I've done the right amount, I'm just going to wipe across the top and bottom with some tissue to clear off any mess, and then I'm going to cure it under my lamp, and I'm going to do that all the way around, and I'm going to give the whole thing 2 coats and make sure that it's no longer sticky. So you just keep curing each section until you can touch it and it's not tacky anymore, and then you know it's going to be great to use. So I have got a gold, a silver and a rose gold, and I'm looking to try and find some other colours. So if anyone knows or anyone does nail art, please let me know, because I would love to have some other colours for this. Hey guys, so we are back to have a look at our finished pieces using acetate. So this is the first time that I have printed on acetate myself and added it into resin. All I used was my inkjet printer. I just had some printable acetate, and I just chose a design, edited it on the computer in Word, printed it off. So let's start off with the coasters. So we have our 2 Manchester United coasters. Unfortunately this one did move ever so slightly, whereas this one's nice and central, but it won't be an issue. These have a gold edge, all the way around a gold edging with the cork base rather than the feet, because they're opaque. It's easier to use the cork, and the cork I think gives it less slipability. The feet are brilliant, but I like the cork because it's all the way across, but you know, everyone's individual. And then there's that one, so they both have the gold. And then we also have our clipboard, and I have blocked out the name of who it's to because it does have a name on it and I want to protect that. So on the back we just have the football crest, again printed off on acetate. I've printed off down the bottom property of and a person's name. Then you can see where the clipboard bit attaches when we turn it over. We have another little phrase here, which again has slid slightly to the side, so that's something I really need to be aware of when I next do the acetate, is to make sure that I'm constantly making sure it's where I want it. And then we have our clip. So nice and thin. This one has the silver edging. So that was just done, painted on and dried with the UV lamp, so hopefully you can see that silver. Try and get so the light reflects on it. So yeah, this is my foray into using acetate in resin, and I have to say it was really quite easy. Things definitely easier than this, I think, just because the clipboard is so thin. It is difficult to keep everything that thin as the colour you want. So I wanted this to be a really opaque white so you couldn't see through it, but I didn't do the first layer dark enough, so I had to do a second layer of white, which to make it a little bit thicker, and then that sort of made everything a bit more clunky. But it's still brilliant, it's still lightweight, you know, you can carry that around with one hand, and then these are perfectly balanced for a glass. So yeah, I've really enjoyed playing with this, I can't wait to do some more. Let me know if you've ever put acetate into resin, and if you've got any tips or tricks that you can share with people, because I love having you guys suggest things as well as me. But yeah, I'm looking forward to making some more of these. Oh, it's exciting, I can't wait. Thank you very, very much for spending time with me today, guys. If you've enjoyed this, please give it a big thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Leave me a comment even if you don't have any ideas or you haven't used acetate before. I just love talking to you. So yeah, that's me for today. Thank you very much for spending time with me today, guys. Keep crafting, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.